this whole thing we're saying
Yes.
about the elections and all,
Yeah.
it is not new to us. Electoral violence is not new. As far back as the first republic.
True.
I mean, you remember that Operation Wete in Southwest, and so many in pockets all over the nation. And we've had a second republic, we've had a third republic. Every single one of them has had one trace of electoral post, even electoral violence, and one or the other in all of the republics that we have had. What is the problem, and why is it that we cannot foresee it and nip it in the bud?
Actually, that one is pretty simple compared to what we are facing now. And I'm going to give you the root cause of that. All along, we've tried different forms of governance. For instance, right now, we are trying the American-style democracy.
Exactly.
Now, one thing Nigeria has refused to do is this. If you study the original American-style democracy, there are certain firewalls that are built into their system that prevent the desperation that is normal with the Nigerian situation. I'll just give you two examples. 1878, Benjamin Franklin, when they were putting together the Constitution in America, he said there are two passions, there are two things that excite men to great agitation: the love of money and the love of power. And so they decided that in formulating the American Constitution and its governance, you must make sure that a position of power must never coincide with a position where you can also make money. Because if you permit those two things to come together, people will kill to get there, and they will kill to stay there. It's just human nature. Second one, just to establish that the thinking has been wrong, and we have to reset this thinking. The second one is education. An American-style democracy will never work. In fact, I remember, I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, a nation that is ignorant and backward, if it ever thinks it's going to have a civilization with that kind of governance, is something that has never been and will never be. Now, piggyback this on what Obafemi Awolowo said in 1990. Awolowo noted that in 1905, the gap of education between the South and the North was about 50 years. And he had pointed out that by 1990, it had moved to a gap of about 75 years. And he pointed out by 1980, by 1990, he had projected that if we didn't do anything about it, the gap would exceed 100 years. And once that gap exceeds 100 years, trust me, he pointed out that the results will be so gruesome that it will be difficult. Now, that's what has come out of the old arrangement. Now, the complication now is this. We did not take care of that at the centrifugal forces in the Nigerian core. Now, this added complication has come, and this is a time that we need courage in this country, because we're talking about the lives of people. This greater threat than that old one, because if it was just that old one and we sat down and we tweaked with the Nigerian constitution to fit the African setting, we will get rid of bloodshed completely.
What role do you see, because when you say this election is different from the previous ones, people see it from different perspectives. For instance, the two leading candidates come from a certain region, and then the power blocks definitely behind them. So take us behind the scenes in terms of, look, what role do you see these power blocks play, because it goes beyond just these two persons?
Now, that's a very deep question that has to be addressed. Let's even be very frank. It is a credit to the Fulani cultural nation that within its enculturation program, it has a leadership program, a leadership training program that's natural. And that is especially among the older generation. And what bears witness to that is the fact that the two major candidates today that have emerged are both of Fulani extraction. Now, on a good day, that is a credit. The complication there today is what you have said is the men in the shadows. The men in the shadows who are creating problems in Nigeria, the men in the shadows who are running narratives, the men in the shadows who have the ability to revive. For instance, when the president first came in, to his credit, because I think we need to be factual about these things. The Boko Haram was actually downgraded thoroughly from about 30-something local governments that they were holding sway, the Nigerian army downgraded the Boko Haram really and thoroughly. They had to go back to the guerrilla tactics that they had had before. However, for you to realize that this thing is very intelligent, he just looked at the country, looked at the president, looked for the weakness, checked our history, and saw that there was an ancient Fulani thrust for supremacy in Nigeria. So what did he do?
He latched onto it.
He latched onto it, then funded it, inflated it, and then pushed it as a narrative. Don't forget I said it's a shape shifter. It can shift. Now, what we need to understand is this. The fears of the nation is this. Ever since they changed that form, it's like a chess move. The federal government has tried its best, but it has no convincing answer to what the public calls the Fulani militia.
But John, let me add, I hope you don't lose your train of thought. Did the government inadvertently play into their hands when the appointment of those key security chiefs played out?
Unfortunately, I must say that this is something that is so crucial that if you want to ask me for advice for this nation right now, if we want to think long term, and if we don't want to find out too late that somebody is knocking our heads together, that our problem really has never been religious, our problem is not really Fulani, we need, if you ask me, if we have respect for human worth and we're really strategic thinkers in this country and we want a future, I said we are already at the third phase of a sickness. Frankly speaking, we should postpone the presidential elections. Why? There are certain measures that should be put into place before we have the presidential elections. It's not going to affect, I can see the outcome of the presidential elections. It's not going to affect it much. But it will help us to be sure we will have a nation on the long run.